Welcome to another live stream that we're doing today on the future of work in the age of automation. And joining me today is Joshua Tiernan, that many of you may know from NoCodeFounders. We talked about this recently, and we decided, this would be an interesting topic. It's something that we share an interest in, apart from, as I see, guitars that Joshua also likes. I have a similar one in my home, actually. As you know, my name is Jesse. Joshua, the founder of NoCodeFounders here, is joining me today on this discussion, and he prepared actually a couple of interesting topics that we're going to discuss that he will introduce, and then we'll start talking about it. Feel free to let us know in the comments if you have any questions or remarks or things that you think that we should definitely dive into, not about guitars, but on the future of work and automation. So let's see the first one. Josh.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. So the first point we're going to come at today is the impact of AI and automation in business. So the kind of overarching question here is, can AI and automation have a positive impact on productivity or negative? So from my perspective, seeing the kind of startups coming through NoCodeFounders community, I would say it's definitely positive for those early stage startups. So a good example is one of the most popular tools that we see people using is Zapier. We keep track of all the tools that are being used by startups, and Zapier constantly comes up in the top 5 of tools that are being used, and other similar tools like Triggre are also really popular. One of our founding members actually also started an automation agency, which specialized in basically running automations, initially in just Zapier, and then they expanded into other automation tools. And the sole purpose has been to help businesses with their productivity. And they've got massive clients that are using like up to 1 million Zapier tasks a month, which is pretty crazy capacity. And then for me, myself, I've built a lot of automation directly into NoCodeFounders, into the website when I built it. Some of those automations would be simple things like just adding someone to a newsletter, whereas other ones would be a little more complex, such as when I approve content that's being added on the site, it gets automatically added to our Buffer social media queue, to our weekly newsletter, and emails the person as well to let them know. So for me, running NoCodeFounders as a side project, that was massively transformational, because I can basically click a button 10 times and approve 10 pieces of content and do 30 different tasks. So that's where I see the big strength in terms of productivity for those small businesses, is those small kind of repetitive cycles. I'd be keen to hear what your thoughts on that are, though, Jesse.
Yeah, I am a little bit amazed with the 1 million zaps. That is insane. I mean, I thought we had many, but this tops the charts for sure. I do agree. Like, the automation is really interesting. Actually, Zapier, if you have a paid account recently, I noticed that they also have some sort of AI thing now where you can sort of get like text into a lead, for example. So those are definitely things that especially for like if you want to automate little things in businesses, those are really powerful tools. And I bet there's other specific ones that I don't know about outside of Zapier. We have customers that do the same thing, but more like in business processes in Triggre, and they connect it to other systems. So we see a lot of automation through Zapier, through other things where they tend to collect like data from several resources. One of our recent customers, actually, that we are just have a video of on our YouTube channel, actually, they had 3 systems, and they would literally like have to type over data from one system to the other, which you would think in this day and age would no longer be a thing. But if you grow quickly like they do, this is just something that happens. And then streamlining processes like that, there's a high demand of that, I would say, right now. And looking at like there's some, I read an article on some of the trends for 2022, and one is worker expansion, as entrepreneur.com says. It's really interesting to see that. Basically, it says here, to reduce burnout, find creative ways to lessen the pressure on current employees. And I think that right now, using no code and AI, like a combination of those things, is actually a really good. It's a really good opportunity to really build some things, like to automate work. Like obviously, we said you can make processes that think about using something like those lead, like text into a lead sort of generation to get the lead out of a text. But there's many more things that you can come up with that will sort of make people more productive. And I think that this year and probably for some years to come, this is something that a lot of people are going to be looking for. So if you are indeed looking at either supporting that as a business or have an idea of how you can connect several data sources together and make them work together in a smart way using let's say AI in one or some other things, that is really where a lot of the opportunities are to help this pain that a lot of businesses are feeling. I mean, you can just open any newspaper website, I think is the right word these days, but just open any newspaper, so to say, and see that, you know, there's a shortage of almost any, let's say, any white collar job basically has shortages these days. So if you have an idea that sort of combines a couple of tools using, for example, Zapier or Integromat or Triggre or some other platform to sort of bring that to users, I think that is there is a lot of opportunity in smart solutions there that actually just increase productivity of one person or a team. So I also see that as a positive impact. There are also negative ones specifically for AI. I think that automation in general is something to just increase productivity, which is basically needed to keep the increase in productivity as we've seen it over the last, let's say, 100 years. AI for me also has, well, that's more of a tool that has also a very easy to see dark side, where you have, I think it was Amazon that had a problem with the bias that they had in their company in hiring, and they had this AI that would hire them, that would sort of do the pre-screening of resumes, and that obviously sort of got the same bias in there, which is not something that you want, but it's something that inadvertently happens. And in the Netherlands, actually, we also had something with subsidies where people were based on an AI placed in they had a flag next to their name saying like, hey, this person is very likely fraudulent, which led to a lot of personal problems for people. So there are definitely downsides of AI, and I bet that everyone knows a lot of upsides of AI as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we'll touch on that a bit later as well. And just one other point on that is on the automation side of things, that something interesting that we saw happening with NoCodeFounders is that companies started looking for a kind of no-code ops role. This was maybe about a year ago. We saw a rise in the popularity of this role where companies would hire somebody specifically to come in and kind of improve the operational side of the business using no-code tools, and that was their sole job. So that was an interesting development that's we've seen happen. So moving on to the next point, the balance between human workers and intelligent robots. And how do we find this balance? What kind of tasks can be best suited for people and best suited for robots? So going back to my own example of automating certain parts of my business, with the social media example, the kind of repetitive part of the process where it's compiling different pieces of text, pulling them together and creating something presentable in a fixed structure, that is something that a bot is very good at. And for a human, that's a very boring job because you're clicking a lot, copying, pasting. Whereas the quality part of the process of making sure that that content is good and interesting and it has something useful is much harder. And we're seeing more tools coming out that can do this kind of thing, but it's not good enough that you can be 100% confident that it's going to produce something that's going to make sense when written down. So I think there's kind of an element where we still need human moderation on a lot of these aspects. So in your example of the system where it was saying that certain people were potentially fraudulent, that's probably something that needs a person at the final step to kind of check those things. But I think coming back to startups, which is what we mainly see at NoCodeFounders, the big win is the area of automating the boring, repetitive tasks, and there's lots of them. So anything administrative, invoices, payments, databases, that's where you're going to get big return on investment on your time spent. And another good example would be like a sales process where you could have a prospecting tool like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and then a mass emailing tool that can send outbound sales emails, and it can intelligently stop if someone replies and intelligently send another one if no one has opened it. And with those kind of tools combined, you could realistically spend 15 minutes of your day prospecting and maybe another 15 minutes responding to emails. And in an hour, you can do what a sales consultant could possibly do in half a day or a full day. And those are big wins for small businesses that can get scalability quickly and put their time resources into the things that are going to generate returns. So yeah, I think that's definitely the kind of perspective from the small business scenario. What are your thoughts, Jesse?
Yeah, I see it sort of like it's a little bit of like we tend to have this idea of, especially when we call it intelligent robots, like the sort of the Terminator type robots that are intelligent and look like humans. But I think that even if that would ever happen, there's a lot of steps that we're currently seeing that are way different, and it's more like little pieces of software that are very helpful, that are intelligent in one specific thing. And so I see them more as little workers that you can have. So you have all these little workers that indeed, as you sort of described there, Joshua, is like they take away some of the mundane things or repetitive things that don't require a lot of I would say sort of interhuman soft skills, right? So that will definitely help you scale up, and obviously scaling up is just it's just like an increase in productivity of what you can do with one person, and making that more than what you could normally do as a single person. So I really see that it's going to be this thing where maybe you have like 10 or 20 or 30 of these systems that you use in different situations that help you out and basically filter out information. I think that where sort of the danger lies is when you to explain like AI and those intelligent robots like that use sort of AI type algorithms, right? They're very good at discriminating in things. Sometimes based on things that are not causally related, but are only correlated. So there's not necessarily a reason for that sort of discrimination to be made between, let's say, an item that is good on a production line and one that is not good. But this is where I think you should sort of see AI being super good right now. Is there are examples, for example, for doctors that used AI to identify cancer research. And so they say, like, look, this person developed cancer with these photos, and then this person who had these photos did not develop cancer. And they knew, I think, about 8 or something, like things to look at, the doctors knew. But after the AI actually sort of ran hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or maybe thousands of those cases, they actually found out that they could now identify 12, which they had never seen before. So those things are really helpful. AI is really helpful in sort of like using that. Where AI obviously is less helpful these days, is where you have small number of cases where there's no like good feedback loop. So if you for example have back to that idea that you had, like where you have a system in which you have AI sort of handling leads for you, you have a feedback loop because you can train it, right? So you can say, hey, this was a good lead or this was not a good lead. And that will, in turn, will sort of make it work better for you. It will sort of hone in there on the type of leads that you like. And that's sort of similar to what happened at Amazon, but then in a positive way, right? So you having leads that you like, that's good, but Amazon only recruiting people or filtering out people that did not meet the profile based on racial standards are not the things that they would like. So for these kinds of tasks, I think it's very powerful to use an AI, and it can be a really small thing that has a huge impact. So really, that balance should be indeed like you do some filtering, but then make sure that there are humans involved in the feedback loop, and you also have that sort of mindset where you say like, hey, maybe some of the ones that did not get selected, we should look at them because they might provide information on things that we didn't get out of the system. But in general, I think that intelligent robots and human workers will work really well together because it makes, basically, as you said, it makes work for the humans much more interesting if the mundane things can be automated as much as possible. So there's a lot of opportunity there right now to start little businesses, small businesses that can grow and scale with cool tools to sort of support actually the shift of that balance.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings us on nicely to the last question, which is how you think this is going to affect actual jobs in the workforce. What's your position on this? I think one thing that's kind of interesting is Elon Musk famously said that he thinks there's going to be this kind of universal basic income. It's going to be a necessity because eventually robots are going to automate us out of everything. What's your position on that?
Well, yeah, okay. So we should do another live on universal basic income, I think, because I think that we both have some different takes on that could last us half an hour at least to discuss. But in general, I think that if you look at technology in general as something that sort of takes away like the repeat tasks, and AI just sort of makes that a little bit more attainable for let's say higher intelligent things. It's kind of similar to a thing that we saw in the past. It's different but similar. So in the past, when we got steam engines, when we went from like horsepower things to steam power to gasoline powered, we sort of replaced human labor and animal labor slowly with like machine labor, and it changed the workforce. I mean, back then there was hardly any white collar work, and now there's a lot more of that. So I think that balance also is shifting. But now what we're seeing is that we're not automating blue collar work like we did then, and actually like the non collar work, but the physical labor. But we're actually now sort of automating the white collar work, and I think that some of the lower paying jobs, like really low, some of them are so lowly paid that there's not quickly a business case to sort of automate them or replace them with AI. Whereas in the midsection, I think like the midsection, like, I don't know, like notaries doing sort of a similar thing for everyone who wants a mortgage. Like, it's especially if you have a payslip, or it's a couple of things. They yank out a document. It's not that different than the last one, and they charge you an insane amount of money for what it really is. That sort of thing can actually be automated fairly easily, and also the mundane jobs of doctors. And then you can say like, oh, but that's going to replace doctors, right? So, but then the example that we talked about with sort of recognizing cancer, it means that, for example, if doctors don't have to look at photographs, like you're an oncologist, for example, and you have to look at these photos because you're skilled at identifying which one is going to be developing a cancer and which isn't. If a machine can sort of filter out 90% of that and say like, oh, look, these ones you have to check, then you have more time to do something that machines cannot do. And I think that that is really to connect with people, right? So a lot of the, to stay in the hospital example, it's a lot of people that end up filing a complaint actually say that they don't have a good sort of feeling with the doctor. It's just about trust and about connection. And this is something that machines cannot do. So human connection is something that I think will become so much more valuable. And I remember that we were talking about this, Joshua, and you were like, "Oh, give me an example of how do you see that?" And I was like, "Oh, look, let's suppose, right, that everything is automated in the world. So all these things can be automated, and we don't have to work anymore, right? So this is this universal basic income situation that Musk also talks about. Then yes, you can go to a restaurant where everything is automatically handled for you and robots serve you, or in whichever way is then possible. But that does not give you human connection with other people other than maybe the person that you're there with. So I think that there will be a world where if you want to then have human connection with other people, you would actually pay extra for that, right? So you would go to a restaurant where you would be served by humans that actually enjoy doing this because they don't have to do it. So they enjoy that. So my siblings, for example, they like working in hospitality, and that would be a thing that you would pay extra for because it's such a unique thing that only humans can do. So I think that as more things get automated and AI handles a lot of those things, that the value of real human interaction actually becomes higher, and that is something that let's call it that we now say soft skills. Maybe we'll use a different term in the future, but those things are actually going to be worth a lot more, and people will actually be looking for that also for businesses.
It's almost like the kind of popularity of like boutique things like books and things coming into fashion, like more like physical books when ebooks came along. It's like more of a special thing, and crafts and this sort of thing. And I think we're probably already seeing that to an extent as well, with like customer support roles in tech becoming more highly paid, and this kind of thing. So yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, there's more examples, like because you triggered me with your example that when you take a look at globalization, this is very interesting, and maybe many of the people that are watching now can actually relate to this. So when my parents were growing up in the 70s, they were teens and in their 20s. The things that actually were interesting were like Nike t-shirts and things that sort of were the product of globalization, right? So these global brands that were like big in the US, that would be interesting here in Europe. And what you see is that now, as globalization is basically everywhere, and we are seeing a lot of negative sides of it, that you actually see people have this sort of counter movement. So indeed, boutique shops. Here in Amsterdam, we have a lot of craft beer. We see tattoos being a very sort of making a huge comeback because they allow you to sort of express your uniqueness as a person. And even Axe, one of the world brands, the globalization brands, the deodorant brand, they actually now have commercials with people that are not the standard models and the standard guy and girl models. They have a guy with an arguably large nose, but it makes him unique, and they actually really focus on that. So uniqueness now is sort of a counter move to that globalization. And I think that the same exact thing will happen with automation. So as automation becomes more abundant, the counter move will indeed be human connection, boutique shops getting human service, that sort of thing. Really like skilled workers making things with their hands and stuff. That might at some point actually make a huge revival in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I think we're going a little bit over on our time, so maybe we should jump into some questions.
Yeah, and we have Marta behind the scenes looking at some questions. So let's see if we can see something. Here we go. We have this. Oh, let's see if I did this correctly. Here we go. Yeah, so thanks. John says that automating systems that deal with people is bad, and Michigan's Meijers wrongfully accused 34,000 people of unemployment fraud. And that's, yeah, this is actually like similar to what we talked about with actually happened in the Netherlands as well. It's like when you use a system that labels people and you don't have, as Joshua said, like a human sort of check at the end, and they just get labeled and they say like, look, I see what I think is a causal relation between this set of data and this outcome. That's where it goes wrong. I think that's something that we should be very wary of, where we mistake causality and correlation with each other, because AI is really good at finding correlations, but they do not mean that it is a causal relation. So a friend of mine once gave me the example that if you draw charts, I think this is a very well-known example. If you draw a chart of the number of pirates in the world that has gone down over the years and the temperature in the world that has gone up, they are exactly opposite of each other. So they're sort of inverse of each other. So basically, if all of us become pirates, you could conclude that, global warming will stop. Obviously, that's nonsense, but this is how AIs, if you just feed them that data, how AIs will actually conclude that this should be the answer. So yeah, I do agree that that completely automating systems or AIing systems that deal with people is bad indeed. But if you have a good human check, then you can definitely filter out a lot of the cases that you don't want to look at.
Yeah, and that's not to say that the automation isn't helpful, because it can still dramatically reduce the amount of people required to complete that process. Kind of like supermarket checkouts, like becoming self-serve. You still need someone there to help people occasionally. So, yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, let's see if we have another one. Marta. Oh, yeah. She also reminded me that I should change the slide, which I hadn't done yet. Okay, let's see. Julia says that right now I think AI development is focused too much on replacing humans instead of assisting them. I'm not sure if this is actually true.
I think it's more focused on replacing human jobs, isolated human jobs, like for specific tasks, which to me is the same thing as assisting humans, because it's basically allowing you to do other things which are more important or of more value.
Yeah, and also like it's very hard to look into the future and sort of see which kind of jobs are going to sort of emerge. Before computers, I mean, there were no programmers, right? And now coding and programming and now no coding is becoming this huge thing. And all of us work on our laptops or computers all day long. And that is something that you couldn't see beforehand. So you could argue that back then you had this situation where, oh my God, we're replacing all these things with like the machines take away all this physical labor. But then we get sort of different jobs in response to that we can't think about right now. So I think that the same thing is going to happen actually with AI. And indeed, I think that actually replacing some of the tasks, like the mundane tasks that we don't like, is actually a big thing. I think maybe the media sometimes makes it a little bit into like a apocalyptic thing, which I honestly see it as a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Who would be going to work on new kind of jobs in spaces like the metaverse? Joshua, what do you think?
I think that is, yes, definitely inevitable. What those jobs are, I think, is anyone's guess, because the metaverse is just like so all over the place at the moment, and like so many different opportunities coming up, and people just don't understand it yet. Like the mass market doesn't have it yet. So there's going to be a ton of new opportunities there, but I could not give you any example of what those kind of jobs are going to be.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that we're definitely seeing a lot of activity in sort of the metaverse, like just Microsoft buying Blizzard is really interesting. Sorry, Activision Blizzard. But what I really liked is there's this, I heard it in a podcast. I don't know the game itself. I think it's called Star Citizen, and you have these starships there. And there's a guy who bought a starship for like $100K or something, like dollars. And someone makes that, right? They designed this. And arguably Star Citizen is a type of metaverse. So sort of the creativity that comes along with that and making a starship like that and then selling it, that is one kind of jobs. And very likely there are countless of things that we can't even think about, like types of jobs that will actually emerge that we have no idea of right now. So I definitely think that you see that same shift happening. We're very early in the metaverse discussion. No one knows exactly how it's going to unfold, just like the internet in the very, very early days. But you can see that if it takes off in a certain direction, that it will definitely create new jobs for people, because it feels to me, especially if you've read something like Ready Player One, and that's your vision of like what the metaverse will look like a little bit. It really fosters creativity in a way that we cannot really do with computers yet. So I do think that creative sort of type of job, that will be something that is very interesting. And also, again, the human connection in some way will definitely become important in that. How? I have no clue. Sorry. Such a great time for freelancers. You can automate huge chunks of work and get more projects on board. Independent, flexible work formats will replace many traditional structures, I think. Yeah, that is definitely something that you see. It's interesting to see that a lot of like one of those trends for this year is obviously people being more flexible with work. When we look at, you were saying which tools were very sort of popular on NoCodeFounders and our youth. What you see in companies actually is that you said selecting no-code tools is actually a job now, for example. And so what you see in companies is that the core of their company, like the data and processes, will be something that an IT department will do. And then around that, there's this API layer that all the departments can actually use to have no-code tools interact with the core data, for example, customer data, project data, revenue data. And they can use that to show it to customers or to do marketing and everything. And they use their platforms for that. So if you are a freelancer, indeed, like you can actually, and I'm going to give you a tip here on how I started with my business partner, my business. We started with the two of us, and we did this where we just built projects for people, where we said, look, we'll run into something that we can make a product of. We didn't have a real, like, immediately an idea. And then through doing a number of projects, we actually found our first product that we built. And I think that this is an opportunity right now, because there's so much going on with like no code requests by people for freelancers, that you can actually, if you want to build a product company, you can actually start as a freelancer right now and just do some projects and then slowly get an idea of, hey, what kind of product could I make to support this? So I do agree, this is a really interesting time for freelancing. You can scale yourself up. I mean, Joshua is, I think, living proof of how you can make a side gig into something really awesome and big. So yeah, that is something that you can definitely see sort of these flexible work formats also being used to actually create new companies. Yeah.
There's something interesting that I've seen happen as well is no-code developers, developers who specialize in no-code, actually being able to charge higher hourly rates than a coder, because they can get the project completed so much faster with no-code tools. So that was really interesting, because they could basically deliver something for a similar budget, but faster, and therefore charge more per hour. So great. quite some interesting opportunities there as well.
That is really interesting indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that one. Which jobs are going to disappear in the future because of AI? So I think that the middle, like we said, right, the mid-level jobs are the ones that would sort of be earliest to disappear, because there has to be some sort of business case, right? So at least this is how I view it. So I think there should be this business case where you say, like, look, I know that there's 10,000 people that do this job for $100 an hour. So this is my market size. If I make a system that can do it for 10% of that or less, there's definitely a market for that, because, that is one of those golden rules. If you do 10% of the price. So if you can make some system using AI that can automate that, then that is some job that is going to go. And I think that in the mid-level, there's a lot of things that are going to, those jobs are going to disappear and be replaced, obviously, by others. So, for example, one of the ones that is a little bit more distant, I would say, due to the challenges, is taxi drivers. That is a job that at some point an AI will be able to drive a car, at least in like cityscapes and highways. And that is a job that then is no longer needed. But that does not mean that there are not other jobs that people will be gravitating towards. But that is one. But I think also a lot of, let's say, paperwork-based office jobs, like, I'm not sure if there's certain things, but like you see a lot of companies that have, at least as part of a job description, things such as entering information from one system into another, filtering out information, as we've discussed. That sort of thing, in terms of sales, I think things might be actually just scaled up. So I think the mid-level paper type jobs are gonna definitely be the first to go, instead of the lower or the higher end ones, actually.
I think possibly as well. I think some lower end jobs like administrative type things are also probably going to be a big chunk of that. So you give a good example at one point when I spoke to you about like a job that would be very difficult to automate would be a kind of rubbish collection lorry truck. So that kind of thing would be difficult to automate, but for example, the driving aspect could be automated, so you can reduce the workforce. But I think, yeah, definitely those kind of admin roles at the lower end will be.
Yeah, the trash one is a very interesting one, because actually here in the Netherlands, they had this really interesting point where it is actually cheaper to have people sort out plastic and cans when you dump all your trash into one bin, than to have the whole system of split bins for paper, plastic, and you name it. And actually have humans do this is cheaper than having the whole system up and running to get the split things. So everyone has to split it, and it has to be collected separately and everything. So it actually, like, those things, you have to really take into account the entire sort of ecosystem that you need to create to replace that job. And then you go like, oh, wait, well, we have that all in place, and still it's cheaper to have people just picking out the things. So it's a tough one. So that's like a really, I would say, a low-end job, but humans are just really good at that. Like that sort of seeing what is a banana peel and what is a piece of plastic. So that sort of job, and then the middle ones, yeah, because we charge too much, I say there's a huge opportunity to automate those. Those are definitely going to change. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Let's see. I think customer care won't include robots because of the uncanny valley effect. Robots that look human are scary. Yeah, so when they're like very close to human, that's the uncanny valley effect. So if you're not aware of what that is, it's when something is like when there's a large discrepancy between what you see, like a Toy Story, right? So Toy Story, large discrepancy, you don't think it's human, and then sort of more like Avatar would be sort of closer to getting scary, and the closer it gets without being absolutely perfect, the scarier we get. That's the Uncanny Valley effect. And yeah, I think that is true in terms of like when you think about customer care in terms of that. However, you don't have to think about it sort of. It doesn't necessarily have to come across as being human. So if you are sort of open about the fact that you're talking to an AI, but it's a good one, it doesn't need to have passed the Turing test of being like, oh, we don't know that this is AI anymore, but it can actually open up more effective ways of doing things. So a similar idea that may be relatable is actually Calendly. Right. So if Joshua and I were scheduling a meeting together, I would email Joshua, say like, hey, I can make Tuesdays and Fridays, and Joshua can go like, oh, I can only make the Wednesday. And I go like, well, Wednesday is not good for me, so maybe Saturday. And he goes like, and it takes like 17 emails. If I send him my Calendly link or he sends me his Calendly link, I can decide with my calendar and match it. So it only takes one of the two people and it goes a lot faster. And I think that the same will happen for AI, but it will just be on different levels. So if I would call a business, for example, with a question like chat robots, but then better than we see them today, I would actually be happy to talk to an AI as long as it gets the job done and it doesn't pretend to be a human. So yes, I agree, the Uncanny Valley effect is something to definitely avoid. And as long as we're not there, or maybe we don't ever want to get there, you can actually just be very frank about it. Say like, look, I'm an AI, and I'm here to help make sure that you get your answer as quickly as possible. Then I would be like, yeah, sure, help me. If this is faster, I prefer that over waiting 10 minutes, 15 minutes to talk to a human at that point.
And there's probably a distinction between that kind of service and service in a restaurant or something where you're wanting a customer experience. So you were saying that soft skills, you see them being more highly valued in the future. Do you think that means that those kind of jobs will become more highly paid as well, and like more of a specialized profession?
Yeah, I would say so. So let's elaborate on what we have here. So let's say that this first point of contact would be all automated, right? Then indeed the customer care wouldn't include robots, like when it goes up to the human level, and I would actually pay more for that because those humans would then sort of take care of the more sensitive cases, I would say. So indeed, in serving or in healthcare, they would take care of those situations where robots won't really be of help. So I do think that if you're good at that, that will become a higher paid job in the future. The time frame on that, I do not want to touch on that because I think that anything that we're going to say is going to be so horribly wrong, either way too short or way too long. We'll definitely not get that one right, but you can see the trend going up in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Is it possible to avoid bias in AI? Yes. Actually, Tesla has this really cool video on their AI. I think it's their head of AI that does the talk. It's worth looking up on YouTube. I'll try to find it and post it in the comment section after. But basically what they do is, obviously there's certain situations that you have very little data of. And in order for an AI to really make a good decision on sort of every single aspect, right? You want to make sure that all the data sort of has enough representation. So if you want an AI to avoid bias, you have to make sure that it has enough of the small part of your group. So let's say that the Amazon example, where people of color were actually not being selected because that was just how it was, sort of in relation to what they had done. And the AI just goes like, okay, this is how it is, so this is what we're going to sort of keep doing. In that case, you want to feed the AI the same amount of female applicants, people of any color and background, sort of the same mix all across the board, even though maybe you don't have as many of each of these. But if you do that, then you can avoid bias in AI. The problem is that we don't do that. So I think that grooming data, and this is the point that's made in the Tesla video, grooming data for your AI is actually now becoming one of the most important things in AI. And I think they spent like 90% of their time making sure that they put in the right data to make sure that the AI does not get a bias towards a certain situation, let's call it like that. But that's a lot of hard work. And I think that's actually a lot of human work that goes into that.
That's interesting, because I obviously I'm not a developer, so I don't have that background, but I had kind of thought that the data sets themselves are always going to be biased, so there's always going to be bias in it. But if you can remove those biases like to perfect 50-50 levels, then I guess that is possible. Is that basically what you're saying? This,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's say that you have very simple a system that would recognize blue marbles and red marbles as good or bad. Then the chance of it sort of labeling a blue marble as bad, if you only show it 10 red marbles and then say like, okay, go, is 100% is going to say blue marble is not good, and you go like, no. But it's okay. Blue marbles are also okay. Well, it's never seen a blue marble, so it doesn't know. If you show it as a test data, 10 blue marbles, 10 red marbles, all the colors, 10 ones of each, then after that, whatever you show it, it will label it the way you want it. But this is really, it really does come down to like really grooming the data. And for the example of the cars, one thing that you have very little data of, for example, is blinking orange traffic lights, because they're always red. Then like I think 10% of the time they're green, and then like very seldom are they orange, and let alone blinking. So actually getting that data in to make the car recognize what an orange light is really hard, and you have to groom it. So you have to throw away like almost all your data, first of all, because 99% of the data I think is like empty highway. So that is definitely out the window. And then sort of grooming it so that you have as many cases of red lights, green lights, and orange lights to really make it understand that these three things are traffic lights. That is what it is, and that's obviously simple when it's just three lights, but a lot harder when it comes to like human traits and texts and applicants. It's a lot tougher. But this is, I think, one of the main things now that companies are focusing on to avoid bias in AI. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, let's go to the last question. And then I think that we're gone because we're almost, we ran for a long time, but that's good. There's a lot of questions, so that's good. Let's do one last one. How will automation affect wages? Well, I think Joshua made a really good suggestion there that wages sort of for those human soft skills will go up. This was a couple of years ago. I was talking to our VP of our technology and infrastructure, and we're sitting in his car, and he's like, "Yeah, his son was, I think he was like 8 or 10 at the time," and we're talking about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about whether I should teach him how to learn coding and everything." And I was like, "Well, I'm sorry, but like we're building this system that is a no-code platform, so I mean, we are actually like we're sort of like building the system that would make that go away." Like I told him, like, would you sort of tell your son to go and be I picked any other job that was going away then? And I was like, no. He was like, no. And I was like, well, but as soon as your son is older, no-code platforms are going to be all around. And a lot of these things are going to be done. So yes, there will definitely still be a world of coding and everything, but is it going to be there for 60, 70 years? I don't know. I said, look, if you really, really, really want to help your kid, make them do creativity and human connection. I think that those two things are going to see a huge increase in wages. You already see it with the maker communities everywhere, that sort of the creativity and sort of unique thinking and connections, and those things are already being valued, because this is something that humans still do better than machines. And so I think that social interaction would be another one like that. Whereas those things that can be automated will just, they will be worth far less. If you take that business case that we talked about, where you can do it for 10% and 10,000 people are doing it now in your target audience, then that's definitely going to affect their wage, because that means that they can only get 10% of that, and probably they won't want to work for that. So that is going to definitely change, but that's going to go slowly over time, right? It's not a one to the other day sort of thing. But notaries, for example, already earn less than they did 20, 30 years ago, because a lot of the work is actually now being automated. So that is a good example of something that is slowly being affected, the wages and sort of the fees that they can charge.
Interesting. I think as well, I don't know how this will affect wages, but I think no-code's definitely kind of opening up the technical sphere to a lot more people. So currently technical skills are very highly valued, but you have to be really quite technical to do that. Whereas like someone like me, who's kind of semi-technical, and then I have other skills like business type skills, there's this not being a place for us really, but now there's a kind of interesting crossover where people with those skills can kind of power up themselves with no code and be able to do a lot more and be a lot more useful to companies by, for example, automating and building systems, building internal tools, which can all speed up processes and this kind of thing. So I can see a lot of that happening, like a lot more jobs in that sphere that have a technical requirement that didn't exist before. So I think even though these other skills like creative skills and soft skills are being valued more, I think no code opens up that technical field so much wider that people can get into it with a much lower learning curve, who don't necessarily want to go the full way into becoming a software developer or something like that. So I think that would be really, really important thing in the next kind of 5-10 years.
Yeah, and to use a word in general, but like what you see is that AI is very good at like very specific things, right? So it's like very deep, specialized things. A more sort of generic AI is something that's incredibly hard to develop. So that's going to take a long time. So I think that, like you're saying, like having a little bit of technical insight, a little bit of skills on a business, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of this, that sort of generalist attitude, I think that is going to also be for a long time be worth a lot, because that means that you can connect the dots between different things and connect those systems, actually those AI systems that might be really good for like certain marketing or certain sales things, and sort of see the overarching thing. So I think that specialists will have to be sort of extreme specialists. So coding, extreme specialists, like the ones that we have on payroll are all like super highly skilled programmers. That will become like you have to be more skilled to be a really, really good programmer. And then you have generalists, because those middle things, they tend to fall out of that. So then the generalists that combine those coding skills or the no-code platform with a cool marketing idea that can voice that and sort of connect those dots, those are definitely things that will also in sort of the more short and medium term actually create a lot of value for companies. So if you're a freelancer and you're able to connect those things, I think that is also really good. So no-code definitely empowers people to be able to do that a lot more. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I think that was the last question. Thanks, Joshua, for joining and for the really interesting topics to talk about today. I'm pretty sure that we'll do another live session, whether that's with or without our guitars. We'll see then. But thanks for today, and we'll talk soon. One thing is that we do have is soon we'll be announcing a webinar together. The exact date and time, we're still sort of figuring that out, where we'll show you some things that you as a founder of a company can actually use to build your own business. So don't miss out on that. We'll definitely announce it on our socials. It will be up in, I think, like a week or 2-3. So see you soon, and thanks for today. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.